Okay, I think last week where I left off in telling you a little bit about how our garden got started is I told you we had started back in our corner of our fence line, and we had started with flowers, started with the roses, and then that fall we added some daffodils, and all of those are doing well and continue to come back each year. And I'll kind of give you just a view here of our flowers again. I've got some stuff that this particular type of rose, you don't have to deadhead it. It will self clean, and so I don't have to do this, but sometimes it's a little therapeutic to just come out here and pull off those dead petals, and that'll just encourage some more growth through here. But we've got our rose bushes, and then this one had a lot of these red leaves on it last week, but you can see it's already starting to bud again, and we're getting some brand new blooms here. And then our daffodils kind of were down in this area. And so that's where we started in our garden. And then, let's see, so that was the roses we put in the spring of 2021. And then I guess it was a year later in that fall in 2022 is when we put in the daffodils, but they didn't bloom for the first time until spring. It would have been spring of 2023. And then that year, when I had a little itty bitty baby who was not even a year yet, I had asked my husband if we could do some raised beds, and so we added two 3 by 5 foot raised beds to our garden, and that's where we started with all of our raised bed gardening. And that year, if I can remember, we had tomatoes and some, I think, bell peppers, and we might have had zucchini and squash. I think we got a few zucchini and squash from that harvest, and I think we got maybe a couple of tomatoes. So it was really brand new to gardening, had no idea what I was doing. I had a little itty bitty guy, and honestly I forgot to water often. And so I think our harvest did not do very well that year. And so that's how we incrementally over time added new things to the garden. And I'll continue kind of that story over the next couple of weeks about what we then added later and how we just continued to grow our garden into what it is. But we didn't add those 2 raised beds until spring of 2023. And I think most of our stuff that year, I think I started the zucchini and squash from seed, but our tomatoes were transplants from the nursery, and so were our pepper plants that year as well. And then I think we also had different herbs that we added to the garden. I think we had a couple, I remember distinctively we had a couple of basil plants, but those were also transplants as well. And so in the past couple of years, I've tried to do more stuff by seed, but that's been a learning in progress as well. But let's go ahead and do our garden walkthrough for today. I'm going to go ahead and start you over here. We'll get back to the flowers in a few minutes because I want to show you some neat things over here. But we're going to start with tomatoes. So I came back and just yesterday pruned a lot of these branches that are kind of hanging low down, but you can see here we've got some tomatoes. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. We've got a couple down here, 1, I think you can see that 1, and then 3 right here. And so that particular plant seems to be pretty fruitful. We've got this one over here with this bigger tomato, and then you can see these smaller tomatoes on here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this 5th one I don't know if these will bud into tomatoes or not. I've got another one right here. So we've got quite a few tomatoes that are starting to grow. And like I said, I came out here and pruned a lot of this back. And then in our other tomato area, I need to come through and prune some of this back so this will continue to grow. And I just put in these tomato cages. Hopefully you can see those cages there. But what I'm going to do is use those to trellis the tomato plants that are in between there, and I'll go ahead and show you this right here. We've got our zucchini plants kind of starting to come in and get some height. One thing I didn't necessarily think about when I put the tomato plants back here is being able to have easier access to these zucchini plants. Now once they actually get a little bit taller and kind of start growing up this trellis, maybe they'll be a little bit easier to manage. We had one of our tomato plants here that did not survive, and so that's how I can get kind of easier access here. But over here in this area, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to access those squash plants over there. And so we've got our squash that's growing up here, and you can see it's trellising up over top, and I kind of had to very carefully kind of encourage it to grow that way. So that is our tomato plants, our zucchini, and our squash. And I'll show you over here, our squash is starting to do some fruiting. I think you can see this here. I've got some fruit here, and it looks like those have been getting pollinated. I know I've been hearing a lot of buzzing around the garden, especially when I come out in the morning, because I think the bees and the wasps and just different winged bugs are out here, and they are helping us to pollinate those flowers. And you've got little ones right here that are starting to bud as well. And all of this is from that one plant, that first plant. And so it's just got a lot of leaf development, as you can see. And see, look, there's another itty bitty squash. And another one here. So hopefully, oh, and here's another one here. So that'll probably open in a couple of days, and hopefully our pollinator friends will get to that and help us pollinate these things. So our squash, our one squash plant seems to be doing very well, and we're excited about that. Over here on this side of the garden, like I said, we're trying to put these cages on the tomatoes, and then we'll go ahead and trellis some string in between here. Actually, I see a little, which I think our nasturtium is doing a good job here, but I see a caterpillar right here. I don't know if you can see that guy. Try to focus that there. There you go. It's a little bit better, I think. Maybe it's still a little bit blurry, but I don't think we necessarily want that little guy in the garden. He looks like he's chewing some holes in the garden area. He's just, I don't know if you can see that, but he's starting to crawl up my arm right there. So we're going to have to say goodbye to him, unfortunately. But we've got our watermelon growing here, and you can see this is already kind of starting to poke through some of that trellis. And then on the other side we have our cantaloupe here. I'll show you that. We've got our cantaloupe, and it's starting to produce some flowers. Now these are early flowers, so I don't think that's anything that is budding into fruit, which that's not uncommon, that you'll see a lot of male flowers before you start to see female flowers on your plant. But we'll come through and try to figure out, because I still do need to come out and thin these out. So here's two of the plants. Here's 1, 2, and our third. So this one will probably, I might wait a little bit longer to try to figure out how these are growing, but I will probably keep this one and try to trellis that up the vine there. And our sweet alyssum and our marigolds are doing well all throughout, and those are helping to continue to attract pollinators to the garden. And over here, over the weekend, I noticed some of our carrots look like they were ready to harvest, and I probably should have videoed that because y'all might have enjoyed seeing some harvest. And I'll post some pictures at the very end of what I was able to harvest from the garden. But we've got our carrots and our onions. I did harvest a couple of onions Monday for Memorial Day, and so we were able to enjoy those with some of our friends. But even some of these will be probably pretty ready to harvest sometime soon. And let me see here, I might be able to find a carrot that is okay to harvest. Maybe not, because these all look, I tried to look and see what was ready, and so I want to wait until these are a little bit bigger to go ahead and harvest that stuff. But I've got all that growth in there, and then we've got our pepper plant here that is continuing to grow. This will become a little flower. You can hopefully see that there. Oh, and we do have a flower here. That'll become a little jalapeno. So that'll be exciting to see that continue to grow. And our okra has grown a ton in the last week, the plant itself. So we've got our okra plant, and if you look down here, you can see those little okra starting to form. And my mother-in-law was telling me that you gotta check these very carefully because these will grow quickly overnight. They're pretty rapid growers, and so she said pick them when they're about medium size, otherwise they'll get tough. I've never grown okra before, so I think that's a pretty helpful tip. And we also have some strawberries over here. So I've got some little strawberries growing. Hopefully you can see those okay. And so hopefully we'll get a couple of strawberries there. Some strawberries here. Hopefully you can see that all right. And I'm sure Andy and Rennie will really enjoy those. And then we've got some potatoes continuing to grow. I did notice we've got some flowering here on our potato plant, which is kind of neat. I don't think I've ever seen a potato flower. And so I don't know. I'll need to check on that and see what we need to do next with our potatoes, because I know once those leaves start to die back, then it's probably about time to harvest that stuff. But we've got all kinds of pollinators over here. I don't know if you can see them flying around, but those are our potatoes. And then over here in our flowers, one thing I wanted to point out to you is we've got some blue bonnets starting to bloom there. And we've got some over here in the middle of our cosmos. And those are always really pretty to see in the springtime. And those are our flowers over here. Some, coreopsis is starting to come back after we did a big chop last week. We've got bachelor button here's a purple flower, kind of bluish purple flower. And so that is pretty much what we've got going on in the garden this week. And we'll just continue to check on everything and cut back leaves as we can to help with aeration and all of that. And hopefully maybe next week we'll have even more to harvest and show y'all what's going on in the garden. Hope you enjoyed our walkthrough today.
I gone fishing. I can't hang around here no more. I've gone fishing. I close the lock tight.